Could EasyJet be about to turn red, white and blue with a takeover interest from the likes of Air France and British Airways? Could this be the next battle for European aviation? This video features some partner content from my friends at Bellroy, but more on them in a little bit. EasyJet haven't had an easy time over the past 10 years with the impact of things such as Brexit, COVID, and most recently the Iran war caused by the Donald Trump administration. This has not been a great time to be a low-cost airline, particularly if you don't have the lowest cost bases like Ryanair. So today we're going to look into a bit more behind the rationale for why EasyJet is the subject of takeover interest from a number of parties, and also what might be happening elsewhere in European merger and acquisition behaviour. So EasyJet have not had a great time in recent years. They have particularly found it difficult to recover post-pandemic. You can see here their share price on the FTSE 100 was around 1500 prior to COVID, and then dropped down to around 500 post-COVID, and then has never really subsequently recovered on the London Stock Exchange. And that has proved to be quite lucrative for a number of organisations. One of them being the investment fund Castlelake. Now, I do not know the ins and outs of M&A discussions and activities from Castlelake to EasyJet, but the core thing that you need to know is that they have some form in aviation. They are a US-based fund, and they have announced that they would possibly make an offer for EasyJet. This was made to the board of EasyJet, and they don't particularly want it. It could be viewed potentially as a hostile takeover because that they don't necessarily have the buy-in of the EasyJet organization. The EasyJet management have labeled this as highly opportunistic, mostly because of that share price. It is very low compared to what it was pre-pandemic and pre-Iran war, and that they've already bought quite a substantial 2% stake in the business at 403p per share. The management have labelled this as being opportunistic, but if we go back to that share price, it's not really massively been performing very well over recent years. So is it them, or is it the fact that they haven't done enough to be competitive in the stock exchange? So what does this actually mean for EasyJet? Now, there's a number of impacts here, but the key one being is that EasyJet is a European airline and is subject to European takeover rules. This is important simply because you cannot just be a non-European Union organization that buys up European airlines. So, for example, you had Qatar Airways. In the mid-2010s, they bought a stake in Air Italy, but they could not own any more than 49.9%. They could not have a majority shareholding in that organization, which meant that when it came to fail, just before the pandemic, they could not actually rescue the rest of the airline, and that investment was effectively lost. European Union rules state that non-European Union citizens or companies controlled by non-Europeans cannot buy majority stakes over 49.9% in European airlines. EasyJet is a European airline. They are headquartered in the United Kingdom, but they have subsidiaries in the European Union after Brexit, a UK subsidiary and a Swiss subsidiary, which is not majority owned by EasyJet but carries the EasyJet branding, and they sort of work all together very seamlessly. EasyJet, despite being headquartered in the UK post-Brexit, it is still majority owned by European Union citizens or European Union companies, which means that's why it can operate wholly within the European Union on them domestic, in inverted commas, domestic flights within the European Union. This is key because Castlelake probably couldn't make a majority takeover of EasyJet even if they wanted to, which is where the red, white and blue comes in from the likes of Air France-KLM. Now, this is where it becomes very interesting with Air France-KLM Group. Air France-KLM have worked with Castlelake in the past, namely to take over in conjunction with Castlelake and Lindinvest, the Scandinavian Airlines SAS or SAS. This is key because in the case of SAS, Air France-KLM, along with Lindinvest, both European Union companies, took control of Air France-KLM. Castlelake was still involved and helped provide some of the funds to be able to fund the purchase of SAS. And over time, Air France-KLM are slowly building up their equity in SAS to become the full owner of that airline. And you could potentially see a similar case happening here for EasyJet. We now interrupt this video for a message from my friends at Bellroy. I have been using Bellroy products for over 7 years now, and they have served me brilliantly, including their shoulder bag and co-branded Cathay Pacific wallet. So I was more than happy to work with them when they offered me the chance to use their latest transit carry-on and check-in large cases. They're well built, as with all my other Bellroy products, but the best thing about them is that they have been engineered for longevity, with easily replaceable fix-it kits to replace key parts of the case such as the wheels and handles. If you're looking for a new suitcase that is well made, stylish and high quality, be sure to use my link with Bellroy down below or by scanning the QR code with your mobile phone. Thanks once again to my friends at Bellroy, and now back to the analysis. Now let's have a look at what was said in an interview with Bloomberg Television with the CEO of Air France-KLM.
Opaque at this point in time. You have some experience in working with them. We've obviously seen what the SAS deal did and how you managed that process. Air France was the first name that came to mind when I heard that they were involved. Okay. You came to mind. Any conversations with Castlelake? Any interest? Are you in any way involved in this process? What's happening?
No, so we're not involved. Is there any interest? It's not something we've given much thought. I mean, EasyJet is it's a very impressive airline. They've had a fantastic, I would say, history in how they've developed. They've got some great positions, in Geneva, London Gatwick, etc. So it's very attractive, and their market cap is low. So it's no surprise to us that there's a party or there's a group that's looking at at buying them or buying a portion of them. Not a surprise to us. Castlelake is an excellent private equity firm as well. We had and still have a great experience with them in SAS, as you've just said. Yep. So it's not surprising to us, but we're not involved in this transaction.
But your sense would be that the market is undervaluing that business right now, undervaluing the slots in Geneva and places like that, undervaluing the slots that they have for Airbus aircraft in Toulouse. Your sense is that is being undervalued at the moment, hence why we're seeing the interest.
Well, the slot portfolio is quite impressive. Yeah. The number of slots they have at Gatwick. I mean, they've got some new slots at Linate that they gained through, the remedy slots that Lufthansa had to give up with their purchase of ITA. And even what they have at Orly in Paris is we're a little uncomfortable with the position they have in Orly. No, so it is impressive.
So if Castlelake came to you, you're sounding like you would be. You think this could be an interesting opportunity. If they came and wanted to talk to you, you pick up the phone.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I would expect all of our competitors to do the same.
Okay, but yeah, I don't think IAG would work very well. But I could see Air France maybe working. Do you expect the call? Do you think they're going to come to you?
I don't know. I mean, I think you have to ask that question to Castlelake.
Feels like it's a fairly early stage in the process.
I think so. I think so.
Very much there. The discussion was very labelled in a lot of caveats, but it definitely seemed like there would be interest from the likes of Air France-KLM and other European aviation groups. Particularly, he called out around the impressive slot portfolio in key destinations. So even though it's not London's premier airport, Gatwick still has, or Gatters as people like to call it, has a lot of interest from other airlines that might be sniffing around. You also have the likes of the slot portfolios in places like Geneva and places like that, but also the amount of aircraft that EasyJet have on order with the likes of Airbus. So could we see this happen? Well, I think it's probably a lot of rumours at the moment. I think you have seen also notes around how Castlelake could work with organisations such as MSC, shipping and cruise line, that could work together with EasyJet. EasyJet the airline itself is not doing massively well, but one of its bright spots is around holidays. EasyJet Holidays was launched a number of years ago after the likes of Jet2 and their sort of packages, and offers these kinds of packages, holidays. And you could potentially see how that sort of amalgamation there between Castlelake, MSC buying EasyJet, working to create a behemoth in European travel, although we already have organisations like that in the form of TUI. So this was a very interesting article from the Financial Times of London earlier this week, which was primarily regarding an interview with the IAG chief executive, and Luis Gallego, no, that's wrong, it's Spanish, Gallego, calls for an overhaul of how the EU forms and evaluates airline takeovers. And it has been one area which has not been liberalised as much as, say, other parts of the continent's economy have been. And potentially, so you can see here, IAG warning that it could be difficult because of things around involvement of private credit, primarily from non-EU sources. That's where a lot of the money comes from. But also that to be stronger, IAG feels that they need to be able to work with non-European airlines, non-European organisations to be able to do these kind of takeovers and see the emergence of pan-European groups which really form together to create control on the continent for the massive economies of scale. Now, he's obviously self-interested in his argument. The EU has very strong competition rules, and would likely, if IAG, Air France-KLM, or even Lufthansa took over EasyJet, there would have to be divestment of aspects such as slots of aircraft, kind of similar to what the CEO of Air France said in regards to EasyJet Airways and Lufthansa. EasyJet Airways had to divest certain slots to EasyJet at Milan Linate Airport. Where Air France-KLM and their competitors, primarily IAG and Lufthansa, are going to be sniffing around is a lot of these smaller full-service airlines across Europe, which are not part of one of the major aviation groups which we have on the continent. If you don't know, IAG owns British Airways, Iberia, Aer Lingus, Level, and I believe that's it. Lufthansa owns obviously Lufthansa, Austrian, Swiss, EasyJet Airways, Dolomite Airlines, I believe that's it, and Air France-KLM owns Air France-KLM and also Transavia. The Portuguese government rescued and nationalised TAP Air Portugal during the pandemic and is now looking to sell off its 49.9% stake in the airline. The main organisations that have come out and lodged a bid for this have been Air France-KLM and Lufthansa. IAG was considered to be one of the key organisations going after TAP because of their presence already on the Iberian Peninsula, particularly with Iberia from Madrid, but it was felt that they could perhaps be subject to quite strict conditions from European competition regulators, because they would effectively have an almost near monopoly on air services within Spain and Portugal. That puts them out of the race for that. So Lufthansa already has a lot of presence across Europe, albeit no ownership of an airline in Portugal. And Air France-KLM is probably the smallest of the three. And Air France-KLM could potentially be one of the big winners. Early this week, they signed a €1 billion credit facility, which is effectively a rolling facility that they can use to fund any merger and acquisition activity. So clearly, €1 billion is probably not going to pay for all of the investment into an airline, into another airline that is, but it will help. You could think of it as like a facility to use to put a down payment on it, and then they will find other ways to fund that activity through loans, through agreements with equity investors, etc. So you can see that Air France-KLM are particularly keen to see the group grow. We saw in news earlier last month that they were even looking to maybe change their name to something like the Blue Group, to represent the fact that they're not just Air France-KLM, they are Air France-KLM+++, which could see them actually grow in massive presence across the continent if things such as the TAP Air Portugal deal go through, if we see other carriers across the continent look for outside investment and ownership. So with this news, do you think EasyJet is about to be taken over by Air France-KLM? Drop a comment down below. Personally, I don't think it is likely. I don't think the two groups are very compatible. There are ways that it could work, but it doesn't feel like a natural fit to me. TAP Air Portugal, on the other hand, does feel a lot more natural fit, and you can see pretty much that TAP Air Portugal become the airline which connects them to Portuguese-speaking countries, the Lusophone countries, effectively, places like Brazil, places in Africa, whereas Air France-KLM would very much be the global connecting airlines. Where do you see perhaps more merger and acquisition activity happening across Europe? Could the likes of Finnair or others be up for sale? We saw IAG sniffing around and actually took an equity investment in Air Europa a few years ago. What do you think of the whole situation of mergers and acquisitions within European aviation? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my friends at Bellroy for providing me with their lovely new suitcases, and also for providing affiliate links. Be sure to use my code on screen now to buy any of their products and to get a great price when you're shopping with them. Until next time, happy flightings. Bye bye.